This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, everybody, good. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. And this is part 2 of the Afterlife. Last week, we discussed heaven, and this week, we're going to discuss hell. Right? Is hell a Jewish concept? And that would really depend on how we are going to be defining hell or describing hell and what it is all about. I'll begin with the story that I saw a while ago in Reader's Digest. A man was walking across a bridge one day and saw a man standing at the edge of the bridge, about to jump off. He ran over. Stop! Don't do it. Why shouldn't I? I'll tell you why. There's so much to live for. Nah, like what? Well, are you religious or atheist? The fellow at the edge of the bridge says, I'm religious. Me too. Are you Christian or Jewish? He said, I'm Christian. Me too. Are you Catholic or Protestant? Protestant. Me too. Are you Episcopalian or Baptist? I'm Baptist. Well, me too. Are you Baptist Church of God or Baptist Church of the Lord? Oh, I'm Baptist Church of God. Me too. Are you Original Baptist Church of God or the Reformed Baptist Church of God? I'm Reformed Baptist Church of God. Me too. Are you Reformed Baptist Church of God, Reformation of 1879 or Reformation of 1915? And he says, Reformed Baptist Church of God, Reformation of 1915. To which the fellow said, die, heretic, and pushed him off the bridge. So we could always look for all of the things that separate us. And I am no authority when it comes to other religions. But my sense is that if you're a Christian and you look at someone who doesn't believe in Jesus, so then you've got yourself eternal damnation. I'm not sure if that's what Catholics ascribe to Protestants and Protestants to Catholics. I'm not sure. And if you are Muslim, then, unless you're accepting the great prophet that they call Muhammad, they call a great prophet, right? And every religion is sending everyone else to hell. Okay, that's pretty clear, right? If you don't believe exactly like me, then I'm sorry, but you're going to hell. And certainly Judaism has a very, very different take on that. And of course, it only makes sense if we just think about it for a moment. God is the God of humanity, of the entire universe, of every single human being on this planet. God is the God, and therefore of every single human being. He's not the God of the Jews or the God of the Christians or the God of the Muslims or the God of anyone else or the Buddhists, you name it. He is the God of humanity, and therefore it only follows that every human being, no matter how they were brought up, has the ability to connect to God and thereby to have a part of this eternity. And therefore, like I said, the Judaism view is very, very different. Let's take a look at the first source, and then we'll discuss it for a little bit. This is from Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, who's an incredible Jewish thinker. He died at a pretty young age. And there are many books that he has. They're small books. He has a book on Sabbath, Day of Eternity. He has a book on tzitzit, on tefillin, on on Jerusalem, on the mikveh waters. And he takes these different mitzvot and explains them in such a beautiful, uplifting, and relevant manner. And he also has a book, If You Were God, where he speaks about, well, why doesn't God do this? Why doesn't God do that? And the thrust of this book is, well, if you were God and this is what you wanted to accomplish, then clearly exactly the way God is doing it is the way that you would do it also. I strongly recommend all of Aryeh Kaplan's writings. But here we have a paragraph. Imagine standing completely visible before God with your memory wide open, completely transparent, without any jamming mechanism or reducing valve to diminish its force. You'll remember everything you did and see it in a new light. You will see it in the light of the unshaded spirit, or if you will, in God's own light that shines from one end of creation to the other. The memory of every good deed and mitzvah will be the most sublime of pleasures, as our tradition speaks of Olam Haba, of the world to come. But looking back on our life, no one is only going to be having those uplifting moment memories. Your memory will also be open to all the things of which you are ashamed. They cannot be rationalized away or dismissed. You'll be facing yourself fully aware of the consequences of all your deeds. We all know the terrible shame and humiliation experienced when one is caught in the act of doing something wrong. Imagine being caught by one's own memory with no place to escape. Now, that is how we understand once we leave the physical body, and often it's been people speak about their whole life passing before their eyes, seeing every moment and reliving every moment, people who have had near-death experiences. But we are nothing but the sum total of all of our experiences, all of our decisions, all of our thoughts, all of our actions, all of our words. That is what we are. We are the sum total of all of that. And when a person leaves this world, one takes all of that with us. That is who we are. That is what we are. And one confronts that in a complete, total manner. Now, I've mentioned many times that in my elevator pitch of what is a mitzvah is an act done by a physical person in this physical world that allows a person to touch eternity, to touch the beyond, to touch the eternal, to touch God, to touch spirituality. And that is how a mitzvah is eternal. When we make a blessing before receiving an aliyah to the Torah, actually after, v'chaye olam nata b'tochenu, eternal life you've planted in our midst, that's referring to the Torah, that's referring to the mitzvot. And going back to we started with the story about the Baptist fellow, right? Non-Jews also have mitzvot. Jews have 613 mitzvot. Non-Jews have the 7 called Noahide mitzvot. Everyone has mitzvot. Everyone has these means of connecting to eternity. So if a mitzvah is this eternal touch, then we have to realize that doing something wrong in Aveira is an act of connecting to that which is temporary, to that which is devoid of godliness, devoid of eternity. And therefore, by definition, it can't last forever. The only thing that lasts forever is the godly, is the eternal, is the spiritual. So if a wrong act, a wrong word, whatever it might be, those things that Rabbi Ari Kaplan spoke about that we'll be ashamed of looking back. All of those are acts that are devoid of spirituality, and therefore, by definition, they are not going to be eternal. And therefore, there needs to be a mechanism of sorts that when a person leaves this world, the person can cleanse themselves of all of that temporary connection that they made, because that connection can only be temporary, and there needs to be a means of cleansing oneself. Remember when I was single in yeshiva in Israel, in between post high school. So I didn't grow up doing my own laundry. I was very, very fortunate. I had a wonderful mom, stepmom who did all the laundry. I actually I wrote back to my parents when I was in yeshiva in Israel about how backward a country Israel is. I said, in the United States, you put your clothing into the hamper, and 2 days later, it's clean, folded on your bed. Here, it's such a backward country. I throw my clothing into my laundry bag, and there it remains. It doesn't end up folded on my bed. And I had to do my laundry. So I wasn't so eager about doing that. So I would wait till basically I had virtually no clothing left. And then I would push myself and I do laundry. And it was such an incredible feeling of going from having no clothing in my cubby, in my closet, whatever it was, to every piece of clothing that I owned was now there, ready to wear again. We go through this process of this renewal, of this cleansing. And that is built into this system of the world that God gives us. And let's take a look once again at source number 2. When I say once again, we're going back to the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who in his Derech Hashem and Mesilat Yesharim, Path of the Way of God and Path of the Just, where he reveals to us and opens our eyes to literally the Derech Hashem, the way of God in this world and the next. And he writes as follows: V'anam gazar od chazdo yitbarach, his kindness decreed, laharbot ha'atzala levnei adam, to maximize the chances of mankind successfully attaining their ultimate goal. Let's go right to the English. And therefore he decreed that there should be a secondary way to attach oneself to God for those for whom such attachment is fitting, namely those who were overcome by evil, right? And that sounds very, very strong, but let's just say those of us who have a couple of times in our lifetime done some things that we regret having done, perhaps didn't handle things quite as royally as we could have, and we were overcome by temptation, whatever it might have been, but not to such an extent that they should lose existence entirely. These people therefore experience the punishment of Gehenna, the purpose of which is to recompense the person according to his transgression in a way that he will be left with no debt, so to speak, to pay for misdeeds. He or she will then be able to achieve their ultimate reward in accordance with the good acts that were performed. By virtue of this system, the actual number of those who are lost completely when we go on to the next stage is greatly minimized. Such a severe consequence only applies to those who have so completely been taken over by evil that it will be impossible for them to experience the true reward and eternal delight.
Rabbi, could I ask a question?
Please.
You said, like, if you sort of went by the wayside like a couple of times, do you think you could stretch it to like half a dozen times, do you think?
Half a dozen is all I'm going to give.
Actually, it's a serious question, but I mean, it sounds like it. But the philosophy of that seems to be that there isn't really a true hell as such in our belief, but you've got a chance to cleanse yourself.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct. Well, there is not a hell in terms of eternal damnation. It is part of a process of cleansing, of coming to terms. And I would just add, Julian, thank you for bringing that up. Just like in our relationship with another person, if we've wronged that person, if we've misstepped, so we need to come to terms with that. In order to repair and build the relationship, we need to come to terms with that. And that is what is happening at this stage. We're looking to repair our relationship with God, then we've got to come to terms with the mistakes that we have made, with the missteps that we have made. And that is why we have a teaching that Gehenna is a maximum of 12 months. And that's why we have the custom that when one is reciting Kaddish, we say it for 11 months, because the Kaddish is meant to help elevate the soul. And we don't want to ascribe this person, the dear person, the dearly departed for whom we're saying Kaddish, that they need a full 12 months. And therefore we stop. We stop after 11 months. And the fire and brimstone, that is more of a mashal, many explain, a parable to the shame, the regret that a person feels. We know how, if we've really wronged someone, how difficult it is and how shameful we feel when we have to confront that person and let them know the harm that we've caused them and express our deep, deep regret. We know what a difficult experience that is. And when we're dealing with God, we're talking about the one who is giving us strength every moment, and we commandeered that strength and use it in a way that was harmful to ourselves and harmful to our relationship with him. So we understand that it is a deeply shameful, painful experience that we go through, but thereby the relationship is then repaired. And we're able to go on. And we discussed last week, Olam Haba, the world to come, the hereafter, is a connection to God. And that connection to God is based on the connections that we made here and the way that we connected ourselves to God. And therefore, there are things that stand in the way of that connection, and those need to be accounted for. And we need to go through this cleansing. And I would imagine that the fires of hell that we hear about and read about are an apt example or depiction of the pain that we feel inside when we know that we have squandered an opportunity, when we know that we have caused damage to what is the most important relationship that we have. It's often been said that the different relationships that we have as we go through life are all meant to give us a glimpse of our relationship with God. And each relationship, be it as a child, be it as a spouse, be it as a parent, be it as a sibling, is all meant to give us a glimpse of all these facets of the relationships. Let's take a look at an interesting Gemara, source number 3, the Gemara Kedushin. Are there any doctors? Oh, there we go. Hello, doctor. Good to see you. Okay, so Morris, good to see you, Dr. Morris. So the Gemara says, Tov shebarofim legehenim. The best of doctors are going to hell. Okay, what does that mean? right? We know that there is a mitzvah to help others. We know that the Torah, not like I think the Christian Scientist group that views any medical intervention as interfering with the will of God. We say the Torah tells us, "V'rapo yirapeh, heal you shall heal." It is a beautiful, holy, lofty profession. So what does the Gemara mean when it says, Tov shebarofim legehenim, the best of the doctors are destined for Gehenna? So the Maharsha, one of the classic commentators on all the Agadata, all of the non-halachic Gemaras, parts of the Talmud that we have, he explains. Dahainu, this is someone shemachzik atzmo letov. Oh, it doesn't mean the best of the doctors. Tov shebarofa means the person who considers themselves to be, I am the very best doctor. I am the most expert, of whom there is no equal. He relies too much on his own intelligence and in his arrogance sometimes makes an incorrect diagnosis and ends up killing a patient by prescribing something that was harmful. He should have had the humility to consult with others, since he's dealing with matters of life and death. So that is someone who we say is destined for Gehenna, to have to confront that. I've told this story before when I was living back on the East Coast. A student of mine and his wife came to see Natalie and I. They've been married for a long time without any children. They had gone through 2 attempted IVF procedures, and they were unsuccessful. And they're very expensive to go through. And they came asking, should we try a 3rd time or not? So basically our response was, if you're coming to ask, it means that you have not come to terms yet with not having children. And if you're not going to give it this 3rd time, this 3rd attempt, you'll always be questioning yourself, if only we had done it one other time, maybe it would have succeeded. And I don't recall if I sent them or this was the doctor they were going to, but there was a wonderful fertility doctor in New York. He's the brother of one of the congregants that I had at my shul on the East Coast. And he met with them. And when he finished the meeting, going through all the medical things, he said, you are Orthodox Jews. I'm an Orthodox Jew. And he closed the door to his office and he said as follows, I can try my best. We're all going to try our best. We're going to use our best medical knowledge and practices to help. But it's in God's hands. So now that we've finished going through all the medical aspects, let's together say some Tehillim. Let's together say some chapters of Psalms, that Hashem should hear our prayers and you should be blessed with a child. Now that is Tov shebarofim la'olam haba. That's not a doctor who thinks he's the best, who has this haughtiness, this arrogance. That is a doctor who understands I'm playing a role in God's universe, and God, please let me succeed in this role that I have chosen to play. End of story. Happens to be they got pregnant during that IVF, had a beautiful child, and then had 2 other children naturally afterwards, which often happens. So there's Tov shebarofim, there's the best of the doctors who understand their role and their place, and they're with humility, and they are la'olam haba, to the world to come, for the incredible good they bring to the world and the benefits they give to other people. And the Gemara is talking about a Tov shebarofim, that he feels, I am the best. I know. Why should I confer with anyone else? Why should I say a chapter of Psalms, of Tehillim? I've got this. I know. No one knows better. No one knows better than I. Now, there are what I like to call surprise members in the world to come. And it's fascinating to hear how the Talmud describes certain people who are ben olam haba, destined to go to the world to come. And we think that the Talmud is going to talk about the great rabbis, the great studiers, whether they had the greatest knowledge or the broadest knowledge, the deepest knowledge, or those who toiled the most. And the Gemara relates an incredible episode. I have it both, source number 4 and 5. You have it both in Hebrew and in English. Rav Brocha chuzaha shchiach b'shuka debeit lefet. Rav Brocha was commonly found in a certain marketplace. Havishchiach Eliyahu Gabe. Not only that, but Elijah the prophet was often accompanying him there. Amalei, he said to Elijah, Ika b'hai shuka bar amadaati. Is there someone in this shuk in the marketplace who is going to Olam Haba? Amalei lo. He looked around and said, no. Ad hachi v'hachi, after a short while, chazlo gaber tahabisayim misane ukme. He saw a person, a man who was wearing black shoes, and Jews didn't wear black shoes in those days. So he was dressed in a very non-Jewish manner. And his garment did not have the blue strings, right? Our tzitzit are all white strings. But actually, if we would have the chilazon, that whether it's a snail, a fish, from which we extract the blue dye, then our tzitzit would have blue and white strings. He saw he didn't have tzitzit. He wasn't wearing the tzitzit garment. Amalei, Elijah pointed to him and said, Hi bar amadatihu. He's going to Olam Haba. He's going to the world to come. Rahat Batre. He ran after him. Amalei, my uvdach. What do you do? Tell me about yourself. Amalei, he said, Zilin, go now. I can't talk now. V'tolamach, come tomorrow. I'll explain to you. He came back the next day. He wanted to meet this person. Lamacha, the next day. Amalei, my uvdech. Who are you? What do you do? Amalei zandukna ana. I am a warden in a prison. V'asarna gavri l'chud v'nashi l'chud. And I make sure that in my prison, the men are on one side, the women are on the other side. I want to respect everyone's privacy. I don't want anyone taking advantage of anyone else. For Amina Purai ben Hani Lahani. And I place my bed between the two groups to make sure, like I said, no one is violated, no one is forced into anything. That nothing untoward should happen. Ki chazina bat Yisroel. When I see a Jewish girl, diavi nacham ala'inai, who's in the prison, and I see the non-Jews have cast their eyes upon her, masrana nafshai, I go to all lengths, umatzilnala, and I make sure to save her, that she should not be violated. Yom echad, one day, habinar murasa, there was a newly married girl by us. And I saw the men were looking at her. And I saw that she was in a vulnerable situation. Shakli durdaya decharma, I took some of the sediment of the red wine, the shadila, the shifulan, I threw it onto her garment. V'aman, I said, Distanahi, she's menstruating. And everyone walked away. Amalei, my time less lachute, v'ramit mesane ukme. Well, why don't you look like a Jewish person? Why aren't you wearing your tzitzit? Why are you wearing these non-Jewish black shoes? I'm in and out amongst the Gentiles. Right? That way they don't know I'm Jewish. Therefore what? That way I'm privy to any decrees, any plans they might have against the Jews. And when I hear about such a decree, I run to the Rabbanan, to the rabbis, and they daven, they pray, and that thereby the decree is annulled. Why couldn't you talk to me yesterday? I just heard about a decree they were planning on making. By me, I said, I better get to the rabbis quick so they could intercede. As the conversation is going, two other people walked by. Eliyahu said, they're also going to Olam Haba. Azal Gabai, he went to them. Amalu Ma'ivdechai, tell me about yourselves. What do you guys do? Amalei Inshe Beduche Anan. They said, you know what we are? We are jokers, we're jesters, we do stand-up. Ana Mavdechina Atzivi. Right? We see someone is sad, we'll go over. We'll cheer the person up. We see two people having an argument. We lighten up the mood between them. We bring peace between them. And just if you can see in the Rashi over here, a very important Rashi. Rashi says, Beduche, I have my little cursor there if you could see. Sumechim u'mesamchim b'nei Adam. Rashi doesn't just say mesamchim b'nei Adam, we make people happy. Rashi says, Sumechim, we are happy. U'mesamchim b'nei Adam, and we make people happy. If you want to make others happy, first step is you be happy. You be happy. You be overjoyed with the blessings that you have. And then you can make others happy. So we get a sense over here that the only people in this, I would imagine it was a busy marketplace. I would imagine it was a busy marketplace. And yet the three people that Eliyahu was able to identify, that's at Ben Olam Haba, were not the rabbis, were not the scholars, who knows who else was there. It was everyday people who took their life and made the most out of their life. A warden, a joker. But they took what they were doing and they lived it in a holy manner, in an uplifted manner, which means doing it in a spiritual, connected to eternal way. That is how we get there. Now, if we're talking about heaven or hell, we're talking about the reward, or we're talking about the shame that one goes through, we have to realize that what we do, our afterlife, is simply the result or even the continuation of the life that we have lived over here. And there's a beautiful mashal, a beautiful parable that I've heard, that I've shared in numerous contexts before. And that briefly is of two guys in their mid-20s taking on the world. They're both in the financial sector. They're both very bright, and they're both very successful. They're both married with a wonderful wife. They each have two cute, sweet little kids. And they each, in their own little sector there, bent the rules, were caught, were tried, were convicted, and were sentenced to 25 years in prison. These two 25-year-olds. One of them said to himself, my God, 25 years, I'm going to be 50 when I get out. Now, that sounds young to me. But at that point, that sounded like a dino, that sounded archaic to him. And he said, I've got to make the best out of this 25 years of prison life. And he devoted himself to really rising up the ranks in prison there. And he had the trust of the guards, and he developed the trust of the inmates. Whenever there was any issue going on between the guards and the inmates, he was the perfect go-between. And the inmates appreciated his advocacy for them, and the guards appreciated having this level-headed person who'll be able to make peace and make sure things work out. And he ended up getting his own cell, and he had his own TV, cable piped in there. He was living it up. And then the warden hears about the work he's doing, the role he plays, and he's appreciative. And then when Congress is doing an investigation of the prison, the warden has the congressman speak to that prisoner, and he gives a beautiful explanation of all that's going on. And he rises to the top. He's living the top level of what prison life can offer. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, his wife and his kids are growing up. They've gone from 3 and 5-year-olds. They've gone through grade school, high school, college. They've gotten into relationships. They've gotten married. They have their own children now. And he sends a perfunctory card when he remembers New Year's, this, then, tries to remember the birthdays. That's how he lives his 25 years. The other fellow says, this is where I am. This is not who I am. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a good man. And I made a mistake, a big mistake. And I got caught. And now I'm paying the price for it. And he certainly does what he needs to do in prison there. And he does whatever he needs to do. Doesn't make any waves. But all of his time and effort that he has goes into writing to his wife, explaining how he's feeling, how this has affected him, working together with her, and she's sharing with him the challenges of raising the children, and he's giving advice, and the children start to get of age. He sends letters for the mother, for his wife to read to the kids, and then they're reading block letters. He starts to print letters to them, and then they're getting older, and he's writing them regular letters, and they start to confide in him as they go through the adolescence and the teenage years, and he's guiding them, always working in sync with his wife, and they have a unified front, but the children have this father that they can speak to. And then they get into relationships, and he builds relationship with their to-be spouses, and then they get married, and then they have children, and he starts the process again of writing letters to those children. And then his 25 years are up. The first fellow, his 25 years are up. He walks out of prison. Who's there to greet him? Absolutely no one. He hardly has a relationship anymore if he's still married with his wife. His kids, right? The child arrived just the other day, came to the world in the usual way. Bills to catch, planes to catch, bills to pay, right? They learned to walk while he was away, right? And they grew up to be just like him. If you remember that Harry Chapin song, Cats in the Cradle. So they got nothing left. He's got nothing. The second guy, he leaves prison. Who's there? His wife is there. His children are there. Their spouses are there. His grandchildren are there. And it's an adjustment, but then he is back in the embrace of his family. We would never say the first guy is punished. He gets a punishment, no relationship. And the second guy gets a reward, that there is a relationship. It's not punishment and reward. It's the result. It's the cause of the decisions that they each made and the lives that each of them lived. This is the very simple result, consequence. And that's what Olam Haba is. That's what the heaven and hell is. It is simply the consequence, the continuation of the relationship that we built with God, the connection that we built with God, and the way that we learn to build a meaningful relationship with God is through our meaningful relationships with those around us, spouses, children, parents, siblings. That is what gives us the proving ground, the model of being, of doing for others, of being God-like in doing for others, and thereby having that closeness to God. So it's truly a causal relationship that which follows afterwards is exactly what we have built, what we have created over here. The Meiri in source number 6. Meiri is one of the Rishonim, one of the earlier commentators, right, on the Talmud, right, probably about the 12th century. Ein olam haba schar hama'asim. The world to come, he says, is not the reward for the actions. Aval hu piryam. It is the fruit. What a beautiful, clear parable. You plant seeds, the fruit will grow based upon the seeds that you planted. The guy who plants an apple tree isn't rewarded with an apple tree, and the guy who doesn't plant the seeds is not punished that he doesn't have an apple tree. It's simply that which sprouts out from their actions. It is produced from them like a fruit from a seed, like a fruit from a tree. Source number 7, Rabbi Mordechai Becker in Gateway to Judaism, which is a book that is always on the list of those who are converting to Judaism. They need to read that. And I always say, if every Jew would go through the curriculum of those who are converting to Judaism, we'd be a much better nation. And certainly this book is an excellent, excellent book. And he writes there very, very insightfully. We speak about Olam Haba, the world to come. Haba is the world that comes. That comes from what? From our actions, from that which we plant, that which we build. The condition of the soul's existence in Olam Haba, its degree of closeness and connection to God is directly determined by its previous activities in the physical world. It is the world that comes, the state that results directly from what happens in this world. And that is either the enjoyment of the connection, or it is the pain and the shame of the disassociation, of not having that connection until we come to terms, as Ramchal had said. Until we come to terms with that and thereby cleanse ourselves of those errors that were made along the way. Famous story number 8 of the Vilna Gaon on his deathbed is told the students of the Vilna Gaon in the last hours of his life gathered around his bed, eager to hear their great master's last words. They expected to see him joyous at the prospect of his reward in the world to come, but were surprised to see him with tears on his face. He held up his tzitzit and said, "How beautiful this world is. For just a few coins, one can buy threads and tie tzitzit, and so come close to the Shekhinah, to the divine presence. But in the world to come, it's impossible to do any of this." Those are the opportunities that we have in this world. Opportunities constantly present themselves to us. Opportunities of connection and of closeness, and opportunities of detachment, of distance. And that is basically the sum total of our positive mitzvot and our prohibitions. Acts which connect, acts which distance, which disassociate, which push us away. We mentioned before, well, I think last week we mentioned that hell and heaven are not mentioned, hardly mentioned in the Torah. We saw last week it's alluded to. The Yasef, he was gathered to his people. It's alluded to. All right, do this in order that you'll have chayim, that you'll have long life. Well, There's I, life ends at a certain point for everyone. No one has this eternal life, but the Torah is alluding to the eternal life. But in the Torah itself, in the Nevi'im and the prophets, in the Talmud, certainly it is, but not in the Torah. And I believe Rabbi Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, blessed memory, he would say as follows: we're not supposed to dwell on the reward or the opposite that awaits us in the next world. Judaism is a religion of life. It's a religion of living. You can be a righteous person your whole life, do all the commandments, right? Stop hunger, help the ozone layer, cure diseases. But if you're doing it all because you want to get to the world to come, you are living a selfish life. God is the epitome of a giver, of unselfish. And life is meant to be stages of our learning to be other-centered. Right? When I was talking to a group of husbands, I asked them, what do you think is the most important lesson that marriage is supposed to teach us? Oh, we had a great conversation. And the point that I made is other-centeredness. It's not what I want. Right? We get married, it's what do we want? We have children, it doesn't matter what you want. Right? You're out of the equation. Life is meant to teach us other-centeredness, to be unselfish. Person does all these great things because I want olam haba, then that person is acting in a way that's opposite from God. God is infinite. Everything God does is purely giving. The Torah perhaps doesn't discuss olam haba, the world to come, and Gehenna on the other side, because we need to do what's right, because that is the way we're supposed to live, not for the reward and not for the punishment. It's the last point that I have, number 9, and in the end, the other Beatle fans, the Abbey Road medley is one of my favorites. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. On talking about heaven and reaping rewards after death, a man said, what if we live a rich, selfless, compassionate, caring life here on earth, and then we die and there's nothing, no reward? What happens then? The other man said, if that happens, then your reward is that wonderful life that you lived on earth. The Torah doesn't go into detail about olam haba, about Gehenna. Your reward is the beautiful life you lived here on earth. Life is precious. We wish for long life, to do mitzvot, grow spiritually, gain the greatest closeness we can to the Almighty in this world. When the time comes for us to leave this world, there's no need to fear the next step. It's merely a step along the path. We began last week with Chaim in the plural. Chaim, life, lives. It's merely a step along the path to the ultimate pleasure of being one with God. And the role that hell, so to speak, Gehenna, plays in that is, if there are impediments to our being fully one with God, then that is a cleansing process. When we come to terms with who we are and what we are all about, and the good steps and the missteps that we've made, that too is a step along the path to the ultimate pleasure of being one with God. So that is the Jewish view. There's no eternal damnation. There are steps along the way to the ultimate pleasure of being one with God. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love that you make. And the love you make, I'm understanding that Beatles song, not referring to the physical act of sexual making love, but the love that we create, the warmth, the beauty, the love that we create in this incredible world that we are in. Okay, my friends, I will call it here. I will return next week. Get it? Reincarnation. Okay, next week it is the topic is the Jewish view on reincarnation. And as you know, I like to indulge myself and find cute little comics to post in the emails. But the one that I sent this week about hell is really to the point that we discussed. Right? It was the fellow who was whatever he was doing on the computer. So he is destined to eternity with a early 90s, computer. But that's the idea. The idea is you are a continuation. Your afterlife is a continuation of the life that a person lived over here. So I chose that cartoon not only because it was cute and funny, but it actually speaks to this point. Olam haba, not simply the world to come, but the world that comes from our actions. It's the world that we create. Actually, one of the points it says in Pirkei Avot, da malamala mincha, which is normally translated is da, know, that which is above you. Realize there's an afterlife. But I believe it's the Nefesh HaChaim explains, da malamala, you should know, that which is above, mincha, it's from you. You created it. Right? And every moment of our life, we are creating that relationship. We are creating that eternity. But we do that by living this life as fully, as wholesomely, as spiritually, as generously, as other-centeredly, no such word I know, as we possibly can. Okay, my friends, any questions, any points, please feel free to unmute yourselves. And once again, I look forward to the time that we can do this in person and have that dynamic of people speaking and people bringing up points. And when we do, though, we will still have it online also, because this has opened up the attendance of some people who are not right here in Irvine all the time, some dear, dear friends who might be all the way on the East Coast in the Massachusetts area, or a dear friend who might be down in San Diego area, or other dear friends who are just in the Orange County area, but not right here in Irvine. So we will keep that open also. Okay, guys. Sounds quiet, so I'm going to sign off. Great seeing everybody. Shavua Tov.
Thank
We
you.
will have, you're very welcome. Thank you, Leah. We will have Havdalah online at 6:15. 6:15, those who want to join us. I have my guitar, and we do Havdalah online at 6:15 this Motzei Shabbat at the same go-to meeting spot. Once we change the clock, hopefully we'll be back in person, but if we're not, then we'll be able to go back to having Friday night also online until the point when Shabbat begins. Okay, everybody. Good seeing you all. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah,
My
thank you.
Thank you. It sounds like Colin. You're very welcome.